When your day of death arrives, Alaksandu, in regard to the son of yours whom you designate for kingship, even if he is still a child, if the population of the land refuses him, I, my majesty, will not agree. Early 13th century BCE was a time of trouble in Western Asia Minor. The city of Troy, or Wilusa, stood in the middle of the overlapping spheres of influence of the Mycenaean Greeks to the west and the Hittite Empire to the east. The latter would reportedly come to the aid of Troy and forge the Treaty of Alaksandu, a piece of evidence that today sheds light on historical kings of Wilusa of the time. Here we go through the reign of perhaps the best attested historical Trojan ruler, King Alaksandu. By the end of the 14th century BCE, the Hittite Empire had re-established itself as the main power of Asia Minor. Its main rival, Kingdom of Arzawa, was soundly defeated and conquered by King Mursili II. Arzawan territory was broken into several states, including Mira, Seha, and Hapala, which became Hittite vassals. To the north lay the land of Wilusa, the land of the city of Troy. Wilusa was an important commercial hub controlling the narrow passage between the Aegean and the Black Sea. This was not lost on either Hittites nor Mycenaeans, both powers attempting to achieve control of western Anatolia. It seems that the Trojans generally maintained relations with both. According to the Hittite records, Wilusa had maintained friendly relations with the Hatti at least since the reign of King Kukuni in late 14th century. What we also learned from the Hittites is that by the early 13th century, Wilusa was ruled by King Alexandre. Unfortunately, we do not know much about the historical Wilusan kings in general, besides very scarce information provided by the Hittite tablets. Nevertheless, Alexandre stands as the most well-recorded of them all. There are several hypotheses on the origins and identity of the Trojan kings and Trojans in general of the time. One of them equates them with one of the early Hellenic groups that emerged in late Bronze Age, perhaps either closely or distantly related to the Achaeans. Name Kukuni has been interpreted by some scholars to be a Hittite rendering of a Greek name Kyknos. Moreover, the archaeological layers of Troy 7a, which is dated to precisely this time, reveal the city and palatial architecture of Troy to be built in a typical Mycenaean style. When it comes to Alaksandu, there is little doubt among the majority of the scholars that this name is in fact a Hittite rendering of Greek Alexandros, or Alexander. Coincidentally, Alexandre was also another name of the legendary Trojan prince Paris, whose abduction of Helen was the chief reason for the outbreak of the Trojan War. However, the Trojan War is dated to anywhere between 1250 and 1194 BCE, many decades and perhaps as much as a century after historical Alexandre. Whether Alexandre himself was indeed a Greek based on his name, or simply a member of a Greek-related dynasty that possibly ruled over Wilusa, or somebody else entirely, remains difficult to determine. It is also unknown whether or not he was a direct successor of Kukuni, or if he succeeded somebody else on the throne. What we do know is that his rule was far from peaceful. Those states that were still opposed to Hittites in western Anatolia, perhaps with Mycenaean assistance, also attempted to depose Alaksandu from Wilusa, and almost succeeded. The conflict was eventually resolved when the Hittites themselves intervened and helped Alaksandu defeat his enemies. As the result, Hittite king Muwatalli II concluded an elaborate treaty with Alaksandu, compelling the Wilusan ruler to, at least on paper, become a member of the Western Anatolian network of Hittite vassal states. When it happened that the men of the land of Arzawa began war against me, and they entered your land, Alaksandu, then you called on me for help. I came to your aid, and I destroyed the land of Massa. The civilian captives, cattle and sheep I took, but for you, Alaksandu, I destroyed those lands, and I brought them back to Hattusa. In this prelude part of the treaty, Muwatalli clearly mentions the states of Arzawa and Massa as being a part of anti-Hittite alliance in Western Asia Minor. For his part, Alaksandu was either allied with the Hittites or at least stayed neutral and refused to join the coalition, resulting in Wilusa itself being attacked. Muwatalli then intervened and defeated Massa and at least one other party in the conflict, thus presumably saving Alaksandu from defeat. He then elaborates on the nature of the Hatti-Wilusa relationship moving forward. When your day of death arrives, Alaksandu, then in regard to the son of yours whom you designate for kingship, whether he is by your wife or by your concubine, and even if he is still a child, if the population of the land refuses him, I, my majesty, will not agree. You, Alaksandu, benevolently protect my majesty, and later protect my son and my grandson to the first and second generation. And as I, my majesty, protected you, Alaksandu, in goodwill because of the word of your father, and came to your aid and killed your enemy for you, later in the future my sons and my grandsons will certainly protect your descendant for you to the first and second generation. The Hittite king also mentions numerous other clauses which compel Alaksandu to side with him in case of revolts and other plots. The king of Wilusa is also to contribute troops to Hatti in case of a campaign in Western Anatolia or war against another great power, such as Egypt, Babylon, or Assyria. He also names Alaksandu as one of the 4 subordinate kings in Asia Minor, together with Manapa Kurunta of Seha, Kupanta Kurunta of Mira, and Ura Hattusa of Hapala. Muwatalli points to the subjects of Kupanta Kurunta and the men of Arzawa as especially treacherous and anti-Hittite. He then places Alaksandu under oath before the gods and requests this treaty to be read to the Wilusan king 3 times each year. Overall, it seems that such treaty was somewhat of a standard when it comes to Hittite vassals in Western Asia Minor. The Hatti mostly relied on their vassal kingdoms to oppose any adversaries and protect the Hittite border areas, and would only intervene if the vassals were unable to do so on their own. The ultimate fate of Alaksandu is not known. What we do know is that this treaty did not prevent the rise of anti-Hittite forces in the region. Quite the opposite, the Hittite adversaries were always sponsored by the Mycenaeans to the west. The kings of Achaia, or Ahiava as called by the Hittites, looked for every opportunity to undermine the Hittite hold in the region and further their own. Such would be the tone for the rest of the century.